Maybe a piece of the puzzle was missing there at the end. They tried to make it work with Nature's Prophet. Seemed like it was working well. They had a nice siege movement down the mid lane, and then they started getting caught out. A trend I tend to notice from Fnatic, their supports being a bit out of position, and the other teams being able to take advantage of those weaknesses and moving in. But it got scary there for LGD. They also got caught out. They like their matchup against Secret. Sometimes one pickoff leads to another, and they get their own domino effect.
Chain feed.
Sylar to fall, Fnatic almost did it. Almost.
That blink when he didn't have Aegis was crazy.
Yeah.
They were all 5 smoke. He's like, I don't have vision. I'm just going to do it. And then he gets hexed twice and dies. I also thought the Lotus Orb came out way too late because AM is really slot challenged, and if he really wants another item, he's going to buy a Moon Shard. So you want items that buff him up without actually having gold net worth on him. So like you want Vlad's, like AC on other people if possible, Lotus Orbs, Solar Crest, Glimmer Cape, like all these sort of things, so he can actually be like 8 or 9 slotted. And he just got chain hex and died, and then like a homing missile.
The Lotus Orb was the biggest thing for all of the other teammates to actually try and get it, and it's difficult for the supports to get. So I guess.
Tusk or Puck?
It came kind of late because of that reason in particular. But I still feel he could have maybe gotten a BKB earlier. He still got a BKB. Like, he kept the Battle Fury at the base and he swapped it out for a BKB. I think a BKB was definitely a very important item to have if your teammates can't actually get a Lotus Orb in time to actually help you out. Because he was dying to chain disables, like Hex.
Yeah. As Ben mentioned, of course, in that one. I mean, yeah, blinking in was a pretty risky move to begin with, but then he was just locked down for the whole entire duration. We have a couple of highlights starting from the early game in this game, and as you were mentioning, Dakota, I mean, it did go pretty back and forth. We did have Fnatic getting the lead they wanted. Eventually, LGD pushes back, and then that fight led to Fnatic having some hope. LGD closed it out, but let's jump to the highlights here. The first one in the early game, a bit of a bloody fight, if I remember correctly, in favor of LGD, or in favor of Fnatic rather. But as we wait to pull that up, Fnatic now out of top 4. But they've seen Sparks right on day one. They were actually the talk of the day. There was like, all right, they took a game off of Secret. Is the Secret being weaker, Fnatic being stronger? Yeah, sure, not the best ending they would have wanted, but Dakota, how do you feel about Fnatic and their chances going into the bracket stage?
Well, they have been a crowd pleaser definitely at their start. They're a team that it's very clear that if you back them into a corner, they're going to pull out some crazy shenanigans to get it back, whether it's hiding rapiers in your fountain and being able to pull back games on the brink of defeat. It didn't work there, unfortunately, against LGD. Definitely a lot of spice to them, and now that they're going to have to battle it out in the gauntlet of best of ones, maybe one of those comeback clutches could be enough to take down a team that would be surprising.
Yeah, that's true. Again, as we take a look at some of the defining moments of Game 2 here, Ben, I mean, going into best of one, do you think in some ways that could favor Fnatic if they just decide to go all out in the losers bracket here? Or the lower bracket, rather?
I feel like with the amount of games that are played in the group stage, I don't think that Fnatic, it will come as a surprise to teams that face Fnatic that they will all in the early game. And I think as long as they remove some key picks such as Undying from Fnatic, I think it won't be terribly difficult for them. Fnatic did not secure themselves to top 4, but on the positive side, Complexity is now guaranteed top 4. This is a team that no one really thought was going to be in the top 4, like top 6, like maybe.
Yeah, that's true. Now Group A is set in terms of who's in the top 4, with LGD leading.
This game I thought Fnatic had like in full control though. They had like a pretty good net worth lead, like almost all the towers are down. They subsequently take down Roshan, and again Fnatic showing that they are very capable of dominating the lanes, just not dominating past, I would say, a little past 30 or first couple of Roshans. They really have a hard time of keeping and retaining map control.
Yeah, but something that we've seen throughout the week, Winter, is that with that anti-mage, it's like teams either just choose to say, okay, we just have to end the game early, just let anti-mage go, and if it goes past a certain minute mark, we're just going to lose, or they try and they fail. Here, was it just an issue of the draft, or was Fnatic just focused too much on their own win condition and not really concerned about when LGD could turn around?
I think the draft this game is much better than the first game, that's for sure. And the issue that let them down, I feel, was what Dakota mentioned before. A lot of pickoffs before they were trying to push, delaying the push and giving the key pickoffs means that the Roshan was open to LGD's anti-mage to actually claim. That was, like, I think, the biggest loss. If you're doing a push strat, you don't want the enemy to get the Aegis. You are going to want the Aegis for yourself, so you're going to be confident when you're pushing up high ground. I think the whole early game was good from them. The lanes went really well. Anti-mage was pressured and everything. Storm sort of had a good start as well. It was just the finishing move, they needed that Aegis for the high ground push, and the pickoffs gave away the Aegis to the AM, and I thought they could have ended the game, though, if everything was going well for them.
Right. Speaking of... did you want to...
I was going to say it's unfortunate because there were a couple opportunities that were given to them because of misplays, which I think we might be able to see here, but the opportunities came to them.
They just needed to sharpen their play in that game. I felt they could have definitely won that game based on how they started.
Yeah.
And speaking of Aegis and misplays, we do have that moment that Ben was bringing up earlier with the enemy just kind of blinking in.
I don't... Yeah, he just blinks right into the middle and gets instantly sheeped, and then sheeped again. I don't exactly remember what happened, but there was no grade that came out.
Yeah, Orchid,
yeah. And then this is where you definitely want your Lotus Orb. It disables the sheep. It will prevent the second sheep from doing devastating amounts of damage because the target himself will be sheeped. And Anti-Mage actually doesn't have buyback for the first maybe 45 seconds of his death. And he eventually buys back and they repel the push. But let's say that fight happened like 30 seconds earlier. That could have just been a game-ending blink.
Yeah, so... At the end of the day, though, LGD secures it. As you can see on your screens, ladies and gentlemen, with the standings for Group A, LGD does lead with 17 points. They are now locked in for that first place as Secret got taken down in Game 1 against Phoenix, and Fnatic now not able to have a chance to go into the top 4. And Complexity still battling it out with C9, it looks like. I mean, they still have a fight for that third-place seed. But at that point, we discussed this earlier, it's not going to matter too much because you don't have a choice. You kind of just leave it up to fate to decide who chooses you.
I just want to go, like what Ben said, I'm really impressed with Complexity. I don't mean to sound too like American biased with it, but this is a team where no one had them in their compendium to make it out from the wild card, from the whole qualifier run. They didn't have them in like their top 3 or 4, and some of these kids don't have any LAN experience whatsoever. Ziz on their team, their core carry player, this is like his first LAN is TI. And he's stepping up, and they're all doing really, really well. They're taking games off a lot of these opponents. I hope they're not underestimating him because they're clearly showing that they can adapt very well to the new meta, that play style, and make it work.
Yeah, Complexity, I mean, as they said, as the Freeman brothers were saying, I mean, and of course their teammates, they were all like, well, you know what? We actually are here just to prove everyone wrong. We thought everyone was leading into TI. That's how we viewed the year. And so far, they're doing really well. Ben, do you think this is going to carry through strongly throughout the bracket stage, or as much as possible?
I think so. Just because looking at their drafts, it varies a lot. Like they play Wisp, they play Sven, they play Tusk Techies. Like you really don't know what they're going to do, and it seems like they have specific strategies tailored towards each team, and they're tailored well. And I think that they've certainly done their homework. They're not cursed by the North American instability that has plagued so many other teams in the same region, and they seem very, very determined. I think they're one of the most determined teams out there, not only to prove everyone wrong, but to secure a top placing at TI.
All right. Now, moving forward, again, every match matters a little bit here on the last day because we still have some volatile standings, especially in Group B. Group A, more or less, the top 4 bottom 4 are set. But again, C9 and Complexity still battling it out on stream 2, so you guys can go check out the end of that if you want to. But for us, we're going to start taking a look at Group B. And in their newbie, can they secure a spot or can they still move up? Can they get a win, like a series win at all in this group, or will they end with just a bunch of draws and maybe 1 or 2 losses at the end of the week? That's the big question. Their next matchup up against Vici Gaming. Dakota, what are your thoughts on newbie so far?
So far, it's feeling a bit like last year. Maybe they're playing a bit of possum, and then they creep in, and then they're TI champions. I mean, it's hard to say. Yeah, I believe coming into this day, they need to get all wins, 4 wins, something like that, to be able to be more secured into the upper echelon. But it's going to be tricky. I don't know. Newbie. They're a very intriguing group. Next thing you know, they pull out and they have everything figured out.
That's true. I think if they're in the lower bracket, I still think they have a pretty good shot of placing top 8. So I don't think that starting off in the lower bracket is going to necessarily be the doom of newbie. Okay. I feel like it's somewhat of a different story than last year. Like last year, they underperformed in the group stage. I think they were expecting like maybe top 6, and I think it was like the 9th through 10th area. And this year, they were expected like 7th through 8th. by the majority of people, and then now they're kind of in that 4 to 6 slot, I guess. It's just pretty good.
People weren't even sure if they should have an invite. It was just like they were like, "What newbie's going to come?"
I certainly think they proved all those people wrong. But yeah, they deserve to be here. They have been doing very well versus VP, and it's not like they 2-0 all the weak teams and then they 0-2 versus all the strong teams. They draw. They're even on tier with most of the top tier teams.
One of my first casts was them drawing even against EG. That caught a lot of us off guard. They looked really sharp in that game. It felt like they were kind of going back to their old ways. They led in with the Razor, and they were kind of being a bit deathball-y. Really surprised that EG kind of got thrown off by that, and it was a nice little rematch to see from last year in the upper bracket. But they got that win, and they continue to pull out little draws. And in best of ones, there is no second game to make a comeback.
Yeah, that's very true. And we have a couple highlights here just to take a look at Newbie's latest games. I believe this one coming up from Newbie versus Empire. But as we talk about that, Newbie, they will be going up against Vici Gaming. So Winter, Vici Gaming on the other side, also maybe a little bit surprising in their results. Some people expected them to be a lot more dominant. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they looked really lost in the last 2 games yesterday against CDAC. Lost 0-2 to CDAC, and their draft sometimes didn't feel as natural. I feel like there are a few disagreements between the teammates when they are picking the heroes. Just a gut feeling, from the way they were picking the heroes. There wasn't a lot of synergy together, and they didn't play very well. I was expecting things to be much better when they swapped the drafters back to FY, but apparently not. They are still having problems within the team itself. They're not playing as a unit as well. And yeah, I think in general their draft and team play is not very good in the group stages.
And as we were seeing in that clip, of course, Newbie, I mean, just being on point with when they, their split-second decisions, and they say, actually, we can just turn this around. We thought we were going to back off, but we're just going to turn around, end the game right there, win the fight, wipe Empire, and go onward. So Newbie versus Vici, it basically sounds like Newbie's still kind of on the rise, and Vici not so much. They're being halted a little